strangers. Neon Static, Viola, here to tell you another original scary story. One you won't find anywhere else. I should know, I'm the one who wrote it down. Is it just me, or does it seem like there just aren't enough hours in the day to do everything that you want to do? When I was a child, it seemed like there was endless amounts of time. And there really was. In fact, I actually used to believe that there was uncounted time. The time between when you went to bed at 8 or 9 p.m. and then the second you fell asleep, somebody hit pause on the world clock. Hours would pass until such time as somebody restarted it at 1. Why did I think this? Why do kids think anything? But as I got older, I was assured that there were only 24 usable hours in every day. The same 24 hours for everybody. And for the most part, I believed them. Except something that happened to me not too terribly long ago. It's become Story 321, and here's what happened. I'd recently PCS'd. That's a permanent change of duty station. There's a whole horror story when it comes to TMO and vehicle shipping. But this happened after all of that. After I had all my household goods unpacked, the ones that weren't broken or missing, I moved on to establishing my new routine. You know what it's like when you move to a new area. You figure out, what's your grocery store going to be? What's your gym? And how are you going to get there? People are very set in their ways. Once they know their way to get somewhere, chances are they're not going to deter from it very often. I lived in one of the towns off base, and there was more than one way to get to work. So I was still on that nebulous experimenting with the route. So one winter morning, on the drive to work, when Siri alerted me that there was a shortcut, an alternate route that would cut 15 minutes off my trip. Oh, I absolutely jumped for it. I accepted it immediately. It directed me to take a turn on a road that I'd seen a couple of times driving by in the daytime. It was one of those roads that didn't have a sign. The only marking was that the grass stopped for the space of about 2 cars and then started again. The kind of thing that you just whoosh on past and don't even pay attention to. In fact, even following Siri, I very nearly did. But I managed to hit the brakes at the last moment and make the turn. And that's where the trouble started. Because as I drove down this road, it didn't seem to me that I was going in the right direction. The streetlights disappeared, so I was driving into a near black vacuum, save for my own headlights. And there were no other headlights, no other cars taking this strange insider road. I started to question whether or not Siri was playing a prank on me. Now this was early days of Siri. I'm talking, I had all sorts of dongles and cables to connect her to my audio. That also meant I didn't have a picture display in that car. So if I wanted to adjust the map or the GPS, I had to do so on my phone, taking my attention fully away from where I was going. Not wanting to be the topic of the next squadron safety briefing, I decided I would first pull over before adjusting my map. Up ahead, there was gray light shining over a hill. I assumed gas station, and when I crested it, I was mostly right. It was a visitor center, a way station with restrooms. Good enough. I decided to pull in and see what was what on my phone. I parked, typed in a new address, and then waited, and waited, and waited. The little spinning circle never resolved. Only then did I notice that up at the top right of my phone, where I should have had bars showing signal, I had 3 little letters, SOS, meaning that for signal strength, I was SOL. That floored me. I'd had 5 bars the entire drive. My music hadn't skipped once. I decided the best thing to do would be to back up and just continue down the road for another 5 minutes or so. If I didn't find anything, I would turn around and come back the way I came, using the visitor center as sort of a breadcrumb. I mean, it was the only plan I could think of, and I was reluctant to backtrack right then and there. What a waste of time. I was already cutting it close, and that would have made me late for sure. But before I got on the road, I decided, hey, when there's opportunity. I got out of my car, locked it, and went to use the restrooms. I was a little nervous opening the door. It was old and weathered on the outside, and it gave a hideous creaking sound when I opened it, shrill like nails on a chalkboard. But the inside, everything was polished, gleaming. The floor appeared marble or slate, high gloss. If there was such a thing as showrooms for rest stops along the highway, this would be one of them. I walked in, found a stall, and did my business. When I stood up and began putting my uniform back to good order, I was alerted to a sound. A woman crying. No, not crying. Wailing. She was wailing. The most heart-wrenching, gut-aching sobs you could imagine. It seemed to come out of nowhere, too. It just popped right in like somebody had connected a speaker. I froze, but then decided some other motorist must have come in after me, and maybe they were having a really rough go of it. Something else I recall. The bathroom began to smell overwhelmingly of cucumber melon. You know, that scent that was mega popular back then at Bath & Body Works. I think they've discontinued it since. For a while there, it really felt like every single girl had stashed some of its lotion or hand sanitizer somewhere. We all reeked of it. And now this bathroom filled with that smell too. For some reason, that familiarity gave me comfort. So I leaned against the door, and at the end of one of her shuddering sobs, decided that this might be an instance of girl code. So gently, I said, "Listen, I don't know you, but whoever it is that's making you cry like that, they're not worth it." Now that was a gamble. The girl could have been crying over the loss of a family member, death in the family. But there was just something in that hiccuping, lurching cry that just instinctually drove me towards bad relationship. Odd, because I'd never been in one at that point. But I like to think that girls just sort of know these things. There was a soft gasp. The crying continued, but it was quieter. I could tell she was listening. And that encouraged me, so I kept going, kept chasing my intuition. And at that moment, I had this vision. I just pictured it. The apple from the old 1930s Snow White cartoon. You know the one. A perfectly beautiful apple that gets dipped in poison. And when it comes out, it has that sort of skull motif over it. That image popped into my head so clearly that I knew I had to be right. With that picture in my head, I told her, "He's poison. The longer you keep him near you, the more of you he's going to kill." Another gasp. Had I overdone it? I added, "Maybe not physically kill you, but the parts of you that he doesn't accept, he's going to wither away from you until you're not you anymore. You need to get away from him." A shuddery sigh, a deep intake of breath. The girl was going to speak to me. I leaned forward, forehead against the cubicle, waiting. And that's when the toilet automatically flushed behind me. I double-checked my uniform and popped the lock on the stall door. Humorous interruption aside, the way that she'd cried, it felt like I was broken by it. It felt like I could feel the pain that she felt. And I needed to look at her with my own eyes and make sure that she was okay. I strode out regardless, ready to face the woman I'd been talking to, and came skidding to a halt. The bathroom was completely empty. I mean completely. I checked the other stalls. There was no one there. Maybe she slipped out. Maybe she heard me coming and was embarrassed. I decided to wash my hands and get out of there. The smell of cucumber melon was becoming overpowering. But as I pulled open the door, and that ratcheting creak sounded again, I realized I hadn't heard the door open. Not once before or after she'd left. I got goosebumps all over. With thoughts of urban legends about the woman in white, I scampered directly to my car, got in, and locked the doors. Then I grabbed my phone, gritting my teeth, ready to continue on the challenge of driving into the dark. And that's when I saw it. The map had resolved. Not only had the map resolved, but those 3 little letters, SOS, were gone. I now had full bars again. Too weird. I backed up and I drove on out of there. I even got to work 5 minutes early, despite the pit stop, despite going down a road that I'd never used before. It was the strangest thing. It was like time was a record and the needle just lifted for a pocket. And only once I got to the command did it start again. The interaction felt like a dream, and like a dream, it began to fade almost instantly. I was only remembering bits and pieces. The smell of cucumber melon, the gleaming, almost luxurious marble tiles in that rest stop, the hiccuping cries, and the picture of an apple dipped in poison. I never took that road again, and Siri never offered it either. And over time, I guess it just faded. Weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. 5 years and 1 PCS later. Life was the same, but also different. I was no longer in the military, but I worked with them. I was no longer in the same state, but I did still report to a base. And while I still lived alone, I was no longer single. I'd met and begun to date a man. I'll call him Craig. It started out well enough. He'd seemed intrigued, almost captivated by me. All of my weird little habits he'd laugh at or say were his favorite, at least at first. But as time went on, it seemed the things that he used to love, used to laugh at, began to make him tense. Then he'd start making little sideways comments about, why did I do things that way? Stop dancing around, you look stupid. Like a child pulling the covers over all of their body parts, not letting so much as a toe out for a monster to grab. I felt myself sort of recede. But at the time I thought, well, this is my first relationship, my first boyfriend. This must be compromise. They always said that good relationships took work, and like a frog in a pot of water. No, he didn't turn the heat up all the way at first. Just degree by degree, letting me acclimate to a more and more uncomfortable existence. His moods seemed to come out of nowhere. I won't go into details, but his passive-aggressive comments became aggressive, and verbal became physical. And it happened so slowly, so methodically, that I didn't even realize it was happening. Except, I think deep down I did. I'd wake up and my first thoughts would be what I was doing wrong. I was constantly taking the temperature of the environment around me, waiting for an outburst, a door slam, the particularly heavy tread of footsteps to tell me that he was angry, and it likely had to do with me, and even if it didn't have to do with me, it was my job to resolve it. One day, driving to work, I found myself driving in complete silence and realized I hadn't listened to music, let alone sang or bopped around to it in my car, in so long I couldn't remember. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what to do. Well, that day at work, at lunch, he texted. He and his friends had decided that that day we were all going to go camping. I didn't want to go camping, but I also knew that saying no would cause another fight. It was a fight I wished to avoid. We'd already had a fight that morning. I had been getting ready for work. I'd had my uniform laid out, and had tossed my body lotion on top of it with the cap not entirely on. Like a beeline, he had sprinted from the doorway, jumped directly onto the lotion bottle, squirting it all over my uniform, and then laughing maniacally at what a great prank he'd just pulled. Unfortunately, my face showed my displeasure and dismay. That was a discontinued scent it was hard to get a hold of, and now it was wasted. I mopped it off my uniform the best I could while he paced behind me, recriminating me, saying I was no fun, I was stuck up, no wonder I had no friends. I took it all in stride, put on my uniform, that now reeked of that discontinued scent. Cucumber melon. Smelled it the whole day. I asked him if he had supplies, and he said of course he did, snorting. Even though we both knew that by the end of the duty day, he would have sent texts with supplies for me to pick up on my way. I dutifully drove to the nearest Hy-Vee, grabbed what we needed. He'd asked me to pick up liquor, and the liquor he wanted, I can't remember, was on a shelf next to an apple-flavored moonshine. The label had a cheery little apple on it, with a little face. And for some reason, it gave me pause. I stared at that apple label, not really sure why, then decided it must be some sort of sign from above and picked it up to buy it. Then I got back into my car. Now, obviously, I'm not much of a camper, but I had the directions in my phone, and so I began to drive. The sun sank and went down. It was autumn, and the days were getting shorter and shorter. I always have the mileage counter up on my car. I've heard horror stories of running out of gas, and I never wanted them to happen to me. But the mileage wasn't going down. The map showed that I was driving, eating up miles of road. But the scenery wasn't really changing. It was murky and dark, and the trees by the sides of the road reached out and over, joining hands, making a canopy. It was like driving into a tunnel. I got disoriented, nervous, scared that I was going the wrong way, that I was going to be delayed or late, and then, oh God, what would Craig say then? Not only would his friends being there not stop him, he'd probably cajole them to join in. And they would. They were awful. Is anyone surprised that an awful person had similarly awful friends? I began to panic, feeling a sob begin to climb up my throat. I knew I couldn't drive like that, but just as I made another turn, I saw ahead gray light cutting through the otherwise black night. I drove straight towards it, and there it was, a visitor center, a rest stop. Well, I didn't need to go, but I needed rest, that was for sure. So I pulled in, got up, and walked to the restrooms. As I did, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I checked the screen and, what do you know, Craig, adding on more supplies for me to pick up on the way. It was as though he'd just left the house with his car keys and chapstick in his pocket and assumed I would take care of all of the rest, which, given the context of our relationship, was actually a pretty good assessment. But this now left me hoping that there would be some grocery store between me and the campsite, and if not, the panic began to build in my throat. I had no idea what he would do, but I knew it would hurt. I swallowed the sob back down, telling myself, go to the restroom, splash water on your face, it's just another Friday. I resolved that I wouldn't cry, that I'd gotten myself into this mess and I would use the rest of the drive to figure out how to get myself out of it. I was strong. I was tough. I was trying to recall compliments that I'd been told about myself my whole life, but those compliments seemed like echoes that were fading. It'd been so long since I'd heard them. Was I still those things, with the door whooshing shut behind me? The thought that all of the good things in me were dead, and what was left deserved only what was happening, ripped my heart in two. I didn't cry. I sobbed. I wailed. I wailed like I was mourning at a funeral of my own best traits. The feeling of tears was hot against my cold skin. Couldn't shake the full body shudders that were taking over me. And that's when I heard a voice. A voice coming from the bathroom, one of the stalls. Oh, I was mortified to have come unglued like that in public in front of a perfect stranger. But this voice wasn't angry. It wasn't recriminating. It was gentle, but also confident. And something else. As it said, listen, I don't know you, but whatever or whoever is making you cry like that, they're not worth it. Familiar. I scrubbed at my eyes, trying to clear them of all the tears. Looked around. There was something familiar about all of this. For one, the bathroom was spotless. All the fixtures looked heavy-duty and well-made, luxurious even. Like a... The voice continued. They're poison. Like a showroom. All at once, from 5 years back, I remembered. I had been here before, in a different state, in a different time. I knew this. I'd been here before. The sounds, the sights, even the smell of cucumber melon, the smell of my wasted lotion. It was all here. I was remembering it because I had been here. I knew it, just as I knew that the girl standing in the stall was wearing a flight suit, was nervous about being late, and yet was taking time out to comfort me because girl code. Apples. They're poison, the girl was continuing. They're poison. The longer you have him around you, the closer he's gonna come to killing you. Not physically, but in your soul. The parts of you that make you you. You'll wither down to size. She and I said the last line together. You'll wither down to size. I was frantic. I was going nuts. I wanted nothing more than to sprint forward, rip open the stall door and confront her, but at the same time, I was terrified. Terrified of coming face to face with me. Wouldn't that cause some sort of paradox? It was like a dream. I was moving through water. I couldn't move at all. I was moving forward, and yet I wasn't. It was slow and sluggish. Maybe time itself was holding me back. He'll kill the parts of you that make you you. I didn't want that door to open. I knew what was coming. The toilet flush, and then the door would be open, but I couldn't be here when the door opened. Not because of fear, not because of time, not because I thought it was some sort of monster, or mimic, or skinwalker. It's because of the shame. I didn't want a younger me to see what I'd done, or rather, what I'd allowed to have been done to me. The toilet flushed. Not enough time. I wheeled about, and I sprinted through the door, letting it slam behind me. I sat in my car 10, 15, 20 minutes. I watched the bathroom. No one came out. And then I drove home, the supplies clinking in the back seat. That sound would have brought me shame, would have brought me anxiety before, disobeying a direct order. But then as I drove, I began to picture that apple with that candle wax skull motif over it, indicating poison that had been imbued. But now I saw that the wax was melting away. That voice, younger me, confident me, a me that Craig had met and resolutely decided to demolish. I pictured that apple. I pictured it being offered to me. They talk about canon events, time travelers seeing things happen and having to stand by and let it happen because it has to. But this felt like something else. This felt like one last chance, the very last off-ramp before you're committed to wherever you're driving. And as 5 years before, I had had a chance to hit the brakes just in time to make that turn. I got back to the house that I shared with Craig. I stuffed whatever I could into my car, leaving behind the things I knew I could replace, things that didn't matter. And then I drove. I drove to a friend's house. I'd kept it quiet, what had been happening, but as my friend opened the door, her eyes told me that I'd actually kept nothing from her. I lived with her for a time before I could get back on my feet, get a place of my own. As for Craig, well, the fallout wasn't great, but like the girl from 5 years ago, I'd used some sort of spiritual EpiPen, jammed a part of her back into me. I found that his recriminations, his late-night phone calls, his friends varying his threats, they just didn't hit like they used to. And after time and one threat to go to the cops, he finally disappeared. But no, it didn't disappear. Me. And that's this week's story. I do so hope you enjoyed it. If you too have a glitch in the matrix or skip in the timeline story that you'd like to share, by all means, social media is in the description. And there's liking, commenting, and subscribing, of course, if you'd like to be notified when I do things over here. I'm still not sure what I'm gonna do with this channel. I mean, the book's probably on hold for this month, for all 2 of you that knew I was going to do a book. Just a lot of things have been happening all at once, and I'm so excited to do all of them. I cannot wait to share them with you. So until next week, when we do this all again, stay strange, stay safe, and take care, strangers.